Welcome to Local 3's podcast, Breaking Ground, where we discuss all things labor, labor history, politics, and organizing as it relates to Operating Engineers Local 3. Now remember, not only does Local 3 represent workers in Northern California, but we also represent thousands of members in Hawaii, Nevada, and Utah. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about Utah. I'm happy to have on the podcast today Local 3 District Rep and Trustee Brandon Dew, who is also president of the Central Utah Federation of Labor and a member of United Today, Stronger Tomorrow, Utah. First, Brandon, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of your story, how you got into the labor movement and Local 3. And you're almost a 30-year member, so you basically joined when you were about 12, right?
Well, by looking at me, some people think so, but my gray hair is starting to show through, so my age is coming about. But it's good to be with you, Mandy. So, yeah, as far as how I got into the labor movement, so I came out of high school. I really did not have any clue what I wanted to do for a career. I think that's probably pretty common. That's why people go to college. But my uncle worked for a company called Geneva Rock Products here in Utah. And he said, hey, they're looking for a parts runner over here. So I went and interviewed, got the job, fell in love with a woman that is now my 29-year bride, and realized pretty quick that living on $6 an hour was not going to provide for a family. They were looking for a lube engineer in the shop. And so I put in for that and quickly was accepted in that role. And I would go and change oil as quick as I could in the evenings, get done my job duties, and then I would go out and hound the mechanics after I'd get my job duties done, and found out that it was something that I really liked. I enjoyed trying to troubleshoot things and figure out how things worked. And so the mechanics took a liking to me, and Geneva Rock Products at the time was not part of our apprenticeship program, but had an internal apprenticeship program. And so I moved out of the pit and became an apprentice mechanic. And it was funny because, I was 18 when I started there. By the age of 20, my coworkers had asked me to be their job steward. Saw some leadership in me, I guess. And so I was honored to do that. And my mentor, Del Cox, who was a previous district rep here in Utah, had worked with me. And he would call me and ask me to come out and help with the CAP program, the Community Action Team, which has evolved into the VOTE program now. But I would go out and help the union with organizing drives with non-union contractors and such. And one day Dale called me and said, hey, I need you to come to the hall. And I said, okay. And I came up and he says, I need you to meet these two guys. And it was at the time, it was President Bob Miller. And we had the director of organizing was Jay Bradshaw. And I went in and I thought we were there to do some phone banking or something. And I was in my grubs from work and sat down with them. And after about 10 minutes, realized I was in a job interview. And so Bob looked at me and he said, we want you to come to work as an organizer for the local union. And I said, well, I'm not really sure about that. And I said, let me go home and talk to my wife and I'll get back to you. And at the time I went home and I talked to my wife, Nicole. I says, what do you think about this? And she says, well, what do you think? And we decided that we would give it a go, that as much passion as I had being a heavy duty repairman, and I loved doing that this was an opportunity we didn't feel like we could pass up. And so 22 years later, here we are and doing what I feel is a rather than a job, it's my passion. This is what I love doing. And I love working for this local union.
Now, being under the mentorship of Dale Cox at that time, you learned about the union very early on, but do you remember what it was that it meant to you at that time?
I don't know that I really even understood what it meant at that point in time in my career. I had good people around me that would bring me to district meetings. I only missed a couple district meetings. Working night shifts would throw me off a little bit from time to time, but sure. I had good journeymen around me that helped me understand the importance of a pension at a very young age and what a collective bargaining agreement was. And as a job steward, I was able to be on a couple bargaining committees and negotiate some agreements alongside our district reps and stuff as a job steward. And I don't know. I guess from a young age, I always did love representing people. Honestly, Local 3 means everything to me. It's like I say, this is not a job for me. It's something that's down deep to my core, and I've been honored as I've come up through the ranks and pretty much done just about every job that you can think of in Local 3. I've never been the janitor, but maybe everything in between. But there isn't a day that I don't wake up and just feel honored to be able to represent this organization.
Also, you're a part of these organizations, that we don't know that much about around here. So can you start explaining sort of what the Central Utah Federation of Labor is? You're the president of that organization. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the Central Utah Federation of Labor is the central labor council in the area. And so it's an honor that I get to represent from a community level, different unions that here in Utah, it's obviously we right to work and some challenges there. But we're able to, as a collective, put our groups together and try to benefit labor as a whole through organizing, politics, and things like that. And so we have some monthly meetings where all the unions come together and we're able to interview politicians. We're able to talk about organizing. The Starbucks Workers Union is organizing in the area, so we're able to help workers that are not traditionally in the trades and in unions and watching unionism grow here in Utah. And it's been an honor to represent that group for the last 10 years.
So the Central Utah Federation of Labor is basically a coalition for unions in your area that work together with the common goal of strengthening the union.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just a byproduct of the state afl-cio. So it just kind of breaks it down to a more local level.
What is this United Today, Stronger Tomorrow group that you're also a part of?
Yeah, United Today, Stronger Tomorrow is a group of civic, labor, religious, environmental groups that all came together during the pandemic. So initially, the American Rescue Plan monies were coming out, and a lot of the concerns I think we as citizens have is how our tax dollars are spent and the wasteful spending that we see. And as these groups that I talked about came together, the idea was that we wanted to make sure that these funds were used wisely, that they were spent in ways that benefited the citizens of Utah. And obviously, as labor, I wanted to make sure that we got involved to make sure that our brothers and sisters were represented that way. And so through the American Rescue Plan money, we were able to make sure that there was projects that had good wages, benefits, and working conditions. And since that time, United Today, Stronger Tomorrow, we've seen the infrastructure law passed with the help of our Senator Mitt Romney through the bipartisan group there that passed that. And then the Jobs Act that's gone through. And so these groups, it's been great as a labor leader to be able to share with environmental groups and civic and religious groups what it means to be a union member and what prevailing wage means and why the importance of having apprenticeship programs. So this is a group that traditionally I don't know that we would have been a part of, but we've seen a huge value just recently through the county, through United Today, Stronger Tomorrow. We advocated for $2.3 million for pre-apprenticeship program monies, and we received that money and are now implementing a pre-apprenticeship program here in the state of Utah.
That is really interesting because you mentioned Christian groups, environmentalists, and then labor, which, a lot of times we don't all see eye to eye, but you found a way to kind of create this coalition around, core values, which is how are we going to allocate this money responsibly? And then working together like that, you're able to make a bigger impact, with, coming together as one voice. What does it mean today to be the Local 3 District Rep in Utah? What is your work challenges in that role?
We've had some really good years here in Utah, so our growth has been huge. I think right now, the biggest issues that we face are finding qualified people for all the work that we have. That's why the apprenticeship programs are so important. As the baby boomers are retiring, we're seeing a mass exodus that way. And we've got to attract and retain this younger generation to help them understand this is a good career.
You already touched upon some of the challenges of Utah, but one of them is basically the geography.
Yeah, we're almost 85,000 square miles in the state of Utah. Up until this year, we had 3 business agents that covered that jurisdiction. Was able to petition Dan Redding, our business manager, and we now have 4 business agents in Utah, and we're seeing dramatic effects of that. I mean, it's when you're talking about enforcing collective bargaining agreements and the grievances that come with that, and organizing and sourcing qualified people, having that extra agent has been amazing, and we're seeing the fruits of that already.
You already touched on some of the other challenges being right to work in 1952, losing prevailing wage in 1981, no PLAs on public works, lots of these anti-union attacks. But despite this, Utah is doing really well. Some of the numbers I have include a 48% total work hours increase, as well as a 25% increase in membership since 2014. And that is in spite of all of these attacks. So the question is, Brandon Dew, how have you done this? How have you been able to achieve this with everything against you?
I give all the credit to the local giving us the resources that we need, but also the staff that we have here in Utah. I've got the most amazing business agents and organizers here in Utah. These guys are dedicated. It's morning to evening, and it's just hard work. It's just down and dirty hard work. We work both sides of the aisle politically. We have friends. It's not about Republican or Democrat. It's about labor and who's going to represent labor up on Capitol Hill and help us move things forward. But honestly, Mandy, it's every day these agents are out working hard for this union, and we're seeing the fruits of that. Our contractors are our partners, and it really helps when we're out doing our job, and our contractors are good word of mouth, helps us with the organizing aspects. But a lot of resources coming in, and just down and dirty hard work is what's got us to the point we are today.
Well, there is so much work in Utah right now. I know that our PR was out there, covered the West Davis corridor, a water reclamation facility project. Can you talk a little bit about some of these other bigger projects that are really boosting the work hours in Utah right now?
In 2013, Justin Diston, who was our vice president, was the district rep here, and I was a business agent, and we were lobbying on Capitol Hill for a project called the Trans-West Power Line. And so 10 years later, just this week, we finally got approval to move this job forward. They did sign a project labor agreement with us back in 2013.
Which is huge.
It's a big deal. Yeah. So our master agreement will be covering this work. It is going to be anywhere from, so the numbers are pretty rough right now on what they need, but we're going to be needing anywhere from 300 to 800 operating engineers on that project. And they will be breaking ground in Wyoming on the 20th of June. So just in a couple weeks. So sometimes it's a long time to see that fruition, but the hard work was put in, and we made good partnership with Trans-West and the Anschutz group there. So that's a $3 billion project that's going to come all the way through Utah. And so anybody looking for work, please call Utah's Union Hall. We can put you to work.
Maybe you're going to get an influx of Californians. I mean, you already are, but
we'd love it. We'd love it. Yeah, on top of that, we've got the Uinta Basin Railway that's going to be starting. That brings what we call just the basin in the basin area. So this crude oil is going to be, currently it's being transported by truck over the highway into the refineries. And this $4 billion project with 800 operating engineers is going to start sometime next year. It got pushed back a little bit, but we're anticipating a start date next year. And it's going to be building a railway from the basin into Helper, Utah, where there's already some rail that can transport this crude oil into the Salt Lake Valley. So that, along with the infrastructure money that's coming in, we're double tracking our commuter rail line, which brings people in most of our communities down into the city. That will be double tracked. There is $800 million in infrastructure money that the state has put in. So there's a lot of good things going on here in Utah and a lot of work ahead of us.
Well, and with all of this work comes some challenges, which you had mentioned in the Salt Lake Tribune last year. You're talking about a workforce crisis. What is a workforce crisis, and what are some solutions for this?
I don't think there's any quick solutions for this. I think that this is something that's been coming for a while. We've kind of buried our head in the sand as an industry as far as what the workforce crisis is. But here in the state of Utah, the Great Salt Lake, what Salt Lake City's named after, if anybody's been paying attention, we've got some environmental impacts with the Great Salt Lake and what's going on there. We've lost a lot of water, and it's actually creating some arsenic dust in the area. And I'm trying to help our legislators understand that this workforce crisis is very similar to the Great Salt Lake. It didn't happen overnight, and it's not going to be resolved overnight. But we can either start building through our apprenticeship programs, through qualified training programs, and helping to make sure we don't have a workforce crisis like we have a Great Salt Lake crisis. And that's really the best comparison I can make as far as workforce. We through the baby boomer retirements and that sort of thing, there's just not enough qualified people to do this work. And we're going to end up facing a crisis of rework and rebuilding these projects that we're doing now at a higher cost to the citizens of Utah and to the United States if we don't start investing in our future. And so we've been working very hard with our legislature and our contractors to help them understand we've got to be building our workforce now and investing in the future.
Well, and the problem that you mentioned, this workforce crisis, is not specific only to Utah. I mean, as you said, the baby boomers are retiring, and the younger generation doesn't have access to skilled and trained jobs like they used to. And so there needs to be a shift in the jobs are available, but we don't have the people to fill those seats. And so having that discussion, and then especially in Utah, there's a lot of poverty in Utah. There's a lot of people who don't have access to careers. So investing, yes, like you mentioned, in the apprenticeship programs and using County American Rescue Plan funds to create apprenticeship programs, connecting these jobs with immigrant, rural, and indigenous communities. Those are the very words that you mentioned in that Salt Lake Tribune as part of that coalition. Do you want to talk any more about that? Like, just the conversation of a skilled and trained apprenticeship program is really the only way to go so that we can fill these jobs and that so people in your community have careers.
Through our high schools, there's a lot of the programs that got taken out of high schools, these vocational programs, your welding, your auto shop, your carpentry work, stuff like that most of us that came up in high school had the opportunities of, and those were done away with. And now we're seeing that luckily some of these high school districts are starting to understand what it was a detriment to be able to take those away. And so we're seeing those slowly come back. But again, it's like trying to fill the Great Salt Lake with your garden hose. It's going to be a long time to get this back. And we've got to work together. And I think that, kind of rolling back to that United Today, Stronger Tomorrow group, whether it's groups like that, but we've got to come together as a community, and it can't be an us versus them mentality. We're all in this together. And although there may be environmental concerns that sometimes labor pushes back on because of jobs or vice versa, we're all in this together. So if we can put prevailing wages on these agreements, if we can have apprenticeship standards, if we can have pre-apprenticeship programs in high schools, work with our high school counselors, work with our Native American communities. I mean, there's a lot of need in rural Utah, in the tribes and that sort of thing that we're working with, try to make sure they have good qualified jobs and that these are sustainable jobs for the future for those communities.
Well, and these are organizing opportunities.
The more we can break down the stigma of what a union is and help them understand it's a partnership between our contractors and the union and the communities that we go into, we're going to continue to have more and more success.
Would you say that that's your biggest challenge in Utah, is just overcoming the prevalent anti-union mentality?
I think that's the challenge, in Utah, but I think in America together. I mean, since the 80s, there's been this huge attack on unions and misinformation about what unions are and what they do. And I think that we're seeing, when 72% of Americans now say that they like unions and and a majority would join a union if they could. We're even seeing that in Utah. Over 50% are saying the same thing. So I think the millennials, Generation Z, are starting to see what it is that unions do for them and how maybe they haven't had a fair shake. I think we're going to start seeing changes. But yeah, it's not a Utah specific issue. This is a national issue. And I think we're starting to see that turn around.
Well, I agree. I think the pendulum is shifting, whether or not that's the millennials understanding unionism in a way that maybe previous generations didn't. I mean, you talked about Starbucks, and then also globally, there's been a lot of news in the media about strikes. So workers are realizing they have these tools and they have some power when they collectively get together. And not just in Utah, but, in sort of a global sense. I agree with you. I think the pendulum is shifting, but we have to capitalize on the movement right now, or we'll fall behind.
Yeah, I think that although you never want to strike, that's the last resort. I think that workers are starting to see that that's really the power that they have to try to make change, right? To try to get corporations to understand their concerns, and without that collective ability to walk off the job and have their issues addressed at a bargaining table with their employers. That's the one strength that unions have. And I think we're seeing that millennials and Generation Z are starting to understand that power, whether it's Starbucks. I mean, recently we had the restaurant workers came to our Central Utah Federation of Labor and asked for help. And we got in and helped create flyers and went out and talked in the community. And as we were out there, people are understanding, just the general citizen that maybe is not a union member understands why people are struggling. And I mean, when the average home in the Salt Lake area is $520,000 and the average wage is $20 an hour, I've got 2 young married kids, and they're trying to get out on their own here in this community, and it's a struggle. And so I think people in our community and across the nation are starting to understand why people are striking and what they're trying to achieve, and are kind of embracing that in our communities.
It can be empowering when you realize you have a voice, and it's not a negative thing. It lifts the wages for all. If someone is debating going through the Local 3 apprenticeship program in Utah, and I know you said your son just received his graduation certificate, or any apprenticeship program in the state, what's your advice to them? What should they know about a trade apprenticeship program? And
they just need to do it, right? They need to do it. And the bottom line is our apprenticeship programs are equal to a college education. The difference is at the end of it, you come out and you have zero debt. There is no debt that you're going to incur through an apprenticeship program. You're going to gain the knowledge. These apprenticeship programs, you're earning a fantastic living for you and your family. I mean, our program here in Utah, the starting rate is $23.50 an hour, and the average non-union operator is not even making that. So somebody coming right off the street and getting in a program with no knowledge is already making better money, and that's not including the benefits they're going to receive. So we need these people. We need to see growth in our industry, and all I would say is that if anybody listening to this knows of someone that is interested, whether it be an operating engineer or an electrician or whatever it may be, they should run, not walk, to the nearest union hall.
Yes, when I was growing up, you went to college. That's what you did. And I wish that this had been a conversation for me, because college education means a lot of debt to a lot of families. It means you might have to work at an amusement park straight out of college. I mean, it doesn't necessarily guarantee a career. And I'm going to educate my children on the same thing, because it's an amazing career choice, and you don't get out of it with a bunch of college debt. I know you're very invested in politics. Can you explain very basically how politics serves our membership?
Yeah, I think that there's people that like politics and people that hate politics, but unfortunately, politics play a role in our life every single day. In the state of Utah, we became a right to work state, which weakened unions.
Can you explain what right to work is and how it impacts workers in Utah?
Sure. Yeah. Utah has been right to work since 1952. And really, I mean, you can break it down into a really basic, finite detail, which is that right to work means that you can work for a union contractor. receive the same wages, benefits, and working conditions in the collective bargaining agreement, and not pay union dues, not pay your fair share, to ride on the coattails of those individuals that pay their dues. And it's union busting is what it is. And the federal government has allowed states to implement these laws that diminish our ability to represent our membership. But even more so, what's impacted unions in the state of Utah in 1981, we lost our state prevailing wage. And a prevailing wage is one of those things that kind of becomes the barometer as far as wages and benefits for each craft. Without that prevailing wage, basically the only thing that we have is minimum wage, which is $7.25 here in Utah. 1995, the state outlawed project labor agreements on public works, and a project labor agreement is collective bargaining agreements with contractors that cities and counties and states can put in and say, we're going to have these working rules, these wages and benefits, and the union's hiring halls that are going to be able to provide us qualified people. And they outlawed that in 1995. So we've got a lot of chances.
What would you like to say to someone out there who may be working as a non-union member besides a dues paying member? Why should they even bother to join the union?
My dad always brought me up that you pay your own way, right? And I think that most certainly right to work means you don't have to join the union. But if you choose not to join the union and you're working for a union contractor, you're actually part of the problem and not part of the solution. I've talked with our staff internally, and a lot of concerns about illegal immigration in this country and what the solutions to that are. But really, I kind of attribute right to work and the non-members very similar to illegal immigration and people coming over. They're adding to our communities, that's for sure. But the complaint is the taxes that they're not paying, those sorts of things. And really, when you're a non-member working for a union contractor, being part of that problem, we need to have everybody get together and try to be part of the solution. And when they choose not to be members, these contractors know how many members are union and how many members are not union. And it makes our ability to go and negotiate agreements significantly harder than it needs to be when we have non-members within our bargaining groups.
The non-members can't vote on the contract, so they also have no say. So it's just, it's a matter of integrity, really. And then as more people join and become dues payers, then your strength increases.
Absolutely. I think that's the unique thing here in Utah is our members are members because they want to be, not because they have to be. And I think that being part of that solution is something for them, because really, if you think about it, paying your dues is just the bare minimum of being a union member. That gets you in, and that makes you a member itself. But ultimately, it's like going to the gym. You can pay your gym membership, but if you don't actually use it, and you don't go in and you don't lift weights, you're not going to see any increase, right, in your muscle. And that's the same with being a union member. If you don't get involved, if you don't come to union meetings, your district meetings, your semi-annual meetings, if you don't get involved in your contract negotiations, if you don't enforce your collective bargaining agreement, right? If we have an agreement that says all of the equipment's run by operating engineers and we allow other crafts to run that equipment, it takes away from our trust funds. It weakens our collective bargaining agreements. So we see that in the state of Utah. I think that's been part of our success, is our members being involved and getting active in their union.
Is there anything you would like to say to the anti-union politicians in Utah, some of whom are heavily involved in running the state?
I'd maybe even change that term anti-union, because I don't think it's as much anti-union as a lack of understanding. We just have to break that down one politician at a time. And I think that there's a thought that we just come in and we bully the contractors and we do certain things. And I think that if our contractors could get in front of them, they would say, no, this is our partner. This is where our success comes from. And we just have to break that down. So I think what I would want to say to those that have a lesser understanding of unions is take the time, sit down with a union member, a union representative, a union contractor, and find out what it really means to be union versus what the perception is or what they've been told a union is.
Well, Brandon, you've done quite a lot in your career. over decades, and being this, whether it's politically or through organizing, starting out at the pit, at Geneva Rock, and working in these coalitions and being invested in your community. What are you proudest of achieving in your career?
I don't know that I can look back and just say I'm proud of that. I'm kind of just proud of my career overall. I'm proud to be able to work for this local, as I said previously. I mean, it sounds cheesy, I know, but honestly, it's just not a job. It's something that I enjoy doing. I think there's those restless nights that you wake up and you know that one of the members got terminated, and you're trying to figure out how to help them. There's those rewarding days where you bring somebody into the union and you change their life, and they're appreciative for the health care and the retirement that they didn't have, and a wage that's not getting taken, money out of their pocket to pay for health care. Most recently here in Utah, we just renegotiated our Utah Master Agreement, got the largest increases in Utah history, $3.80 this year for the average operator. That added annuity language, which is additional retirement for Utah, doubled our shift differential, increased our subsistence pay in our outlying areas. So, I mean, there's things like that I could certainly look at and say that was really great. But again, none of that's Brandon due. That's the staff of Local 3. That's our members and standing in solidarity. So I think for me, just being able to work for our membership is the greatest reward and thing I'll look back on at the end of my career and be proud of.
Well, I know that you're also heavily invested in your family, which at times it's hard to have that work-life balance.
Yeah, my family is certainly the thing I'm most proud of. My wife, like I said, of 29 years, Nicole, she is the most patient, tolerant person. This job definitely takes a lot. I'm away from home a lot. I was away from home a lot when my children were growing up. And it certainly tries a lot of marriages. I see it through a lot of the coworkers that we have, Mandy, and the trials that they have. My wife has been very understanding. The last minute call of, hey, somebody just got terminated, I need to go deal with this. There's never been a question of where I'm at or what I'm doing, and she knows who I am and what I stand for. But recently, my son just graduated our apprenticeship program as a lube engineer, had that graduation last week. I'm super proud. I'm a first generation union member. My father was an accountant. I had no clue what unions were.
And now you pass that on to your son.
I'm super proud of that kid. He is a hard worker. My daughter and her husband are great people. I'm just, if I had to say what I'm most proud of in life is that I can look at my family and know they're contributing to their community and they're good people. And my wife had more of a role in that than I did, but I'm lucky that I get to have that to go home to.
Do you have any final parting thoughts for our listeners, Brandon?
The only parting thoughts I would have is, Operating Engineers Local 3 is the best union in the United States. I just want to encourage our members to continue to be involved, be active, know again that your activity is what helps drive this union and make it successful. So that would be, I guess, my parting words today.
Well, thank you, Brandon. Thank you so much for what you do for this organization, for your staff, and obviously for the members. We appreciate you.
It's an honor. Thanks, Mandy.
Okay, thank you.